You are examining a historical picture taken in 1898. On the surface, it appears harmless. A child, perhaps 8 or 9, is seated inside a formal Victorian living room, cradling a china doll. Charming, isn't it? One might assume he is amusing himself with a sibling's plaything. It could be a simple family picture. That was the assumption of historical record keepers for over a century. However, in 2023, when modern digital repair techniques cleared away years of wear and discoloration, experts noticed something within the image that altered its entire story. A detail concealed within the darkness. A detail that transformed this charming scene into one of the most sorrowful images from the Victorian period. That child was not engaged in play. He was grieving. In February of 2023, Dr. Margaret Chen, a specialist in digital preservation at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., was conducting a standard restoration effort on pictures from the Victorian era when she came across an intriguing cabinet card from 1898. The image depicted a young boy, roughly 8 or 9 years of age, positioned in what seemed to be a formal Victorian sitting room. He was clothed in dark, formal attire consisting of knee-length trousers, a dark coat, and a white-collared shirt. Clutched in his arms was a sizable porcelain doll, which had a finely painted countenance and was wearing a detailed white lace gown. Initially, I classified it as an unidentified child with a doll, dated around 1898. Dr. Chen stated in an interview, "It was not unusual for boys to have dolls during that time. I was nearly ready to proceed to the next image, but a feeling of unease persisted. The child's facial expression was uncommonly grave, lacking any sense of amusement or joy, and was instead profoundly solemn. His hold on the doll appeared firm, almost guarding. The overall arrangement of the scene felt formal, almost ritualistic, hinting at a meaning deeper than a casual portrait." Dr. Chen made the decision to put the photograph through a high-definition digital restoration process. The original cabinet card was in poor condition, marred by 125 years of age spots, watermarks, fading, and surface wear that had hidden important elements. Employing sophisticated imaging software, she started the meticulous task of digitally stripping away the accumulated layers of damage. As the restoration advanced, concealed features started to appear. First, she observed the boy's outfit was not everyday wear, but formal mourning clothes. The dark material was black crepe, a fabric specifically reserved for grief attire in the Victorian age. A black band of cloth was clearly seen on his left arm, a mourning tradition used to signify a recent family loss. Then, she refined the backdrop. The entire parlor was hung with black cloth. Customary Victorian mourning draperies covered the windows. On a tiny stand next to the boy was a picture frame adorned with a black ribbon, another symbol of mourning. Recent floral arrangements, probably from a funeral service, could be seen in a container. The most telling detail was found on a small placard visible at the photograph's lower border. Once enhanced, Dr. Chen could decipher partial wording. It read, "In memory of Clara, aged 6, April 1898. Yet the most startling finding occurred when Dr. Chen inspected the doll at the highest possible resolution. The doll's facial features exhibited an unusual level of detail and artistry, significantly exceeding that of ordinary factory-made Victorian dolls. Its likeness was remarkably unique, not the standard painted face of a store-bought toy, but a meticulously crafted portrait. The hair did not seem to be the usual mohair or manufactured fiber, but instead looked to be genuine human hair, brown in color and intricately arranged. Dr. Chen sought advice from experts in Victorian-era toys and mourning traditions. These specialists instructed her to search for particulars, the caliber of the porcelain craft, the design of the gown, the formation of the hands. Their conclusions altered the entire narrative. This was no common plaything. This was a mourning doll, a Victorian-era memorial figure fashioned to replicate the appearance of a departed child. On the reverse of the cabinet card, nearly invisible even after restoration, Dr. Chen discovered a notation written by hand. It stated, "Thomas Whitmore, aged 8, with memorial. Likeness of his sister Clara, aged 6, captured 3 weeks following her departure. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, May 15, 1898. Photographer J.W. Black and Company." This was not an image of a child amusing himself with a sibling's plaything. This was a remembrance portrait. Thomas was holding a specially commissioned porcelain doll made to look like his late sister, Clara, who had passed away just 3 weeks prior. The picture instantly shifted from an odd Victorian-era scene into a heartbreaking record of a child's sorrow and a family's anguished endeavor to hold on to the memory of their deceased daughter. To comprehend the Whitmore family's motivation for creating such an object, one must grasp the Victorian period's connection with death, specifically the passing of the young. During the late 1892s, the mortality of children was tragically frequent. In the United States, roughly 1 in every 5 children would perish before their 5th birthday. Illnesses such as scarlet fever, diphtheria, tuberculosis, pneumonia, and pertussis took the lives of thousands of youngsters every year. No household, irrespective of its wealth or social standing, was safe from the potential of losing a child. This somber truth molded Victorian mourning traditions into a detailed, structured framework of ceremonies intended to openly recognize grief and internally manage loss. When a child died, families entered into stringent periods of mourning that could extend for years. Parents, mothers in particular, would wear complete black mourning attire for at least 1 year and often for longer. Residences were adorned with black crepe material, mirrors were veiled, timepieces were halted at the moment of death. All social engagement stopped completely. Victorian culture did not merely allow for open mourning, it required it. Grieving was a public demonstration of love and loss, governed by strict codes concerning apparel, conduct, and time frame. A failure to mourn appropriately was viewed as disgraceful, but beyond these public displays, families looked for more private, physical methods to preserve a bond with their dead children. Photography became essential in this endeavor. Post-mortem photography, the practice of taking pictures of the recently deceased, frequently arranged as though they were slumbering, was exceedingly common for many families, particularly those with limited means. These post-mortem pictures were frequently the only images they would ever possess of their child. They were not considered macabre or unsettling, but were cherished as valuable mementos, the final opportunity to preserve their child's physical likeness. Memorial dolls represented an even more concrete type of remembrance. The custom of crafting memorial dolls was comparatively uncommon, mainly confined to families of the middle and upper classes who could bear the significant expense. However, for the families who could order them, these dolls fulfilled a deep emotional need. The creation procedure was intricate and highly personal. A skilled doll artisan, often the same craftsman who produced high-quality decorative porcelain, would work from pictures of the dead child and discussions with the family. They would mold a clay model of the child's face, painstakingly reproducing unique features, the precise shape of the eyes, the curve of the lips, the lines of the cheeks and nose. This clay model was then used to produce a porcelain cast. The porcelain would be fired at a high heat, then carefully hand-painted to correspond with the child's specific complexion, eye hue, and lip tint. Glass eyes matching the child's own were installed. Own eye color would be meticulously placed. Most importantly, actual human hair, nearly always taken from the deceased child herself, cut and saved after her passing, would be affixed to the porcelain scalp using conventional wig-making methods. This meant the effigy physically contained a piece of the departed child. The doll would then be clothed in attire precisely duplicated from the child's own closet, frequently their finest Sunday clothes or a beloved outfit. Some relatives supplied real items that had been owned by the child, tailored to fit the doll's form. The expense was considerable. A bespoke memorial effigy could cost between $50 and $200, a sum equal to about $1,800 to $7,200 in modern money. To provide perspective, this represented roughly 2 to 8 months' income for an ordinary laborer in 1898. These memorials fulfilled several roles for grieving households. They offered a central point for sorrow, a physical item that could be embraced, looked after, and shown. For remaining children like Thomas Whitmore, they provided a method to sustain a connection with their departed sibling. Parents could tend to the doll as they had their living son or daughter, granting a small sense of continued purpose during the shattering shift from active parenting to profound grief. Certain families kept these effigies on open display for many years. Others stored them away safely, retrieving them for remembrance days or during especially hard moments of sorrow. A small number were eventually interred with the mother upon her own death, symbolically joining parent and child once more. By the start of the 20th century, as death rates among the young started to fall because of better medicine and sanitation, and as elaborate Victorian mourning traditions were replaced by simpler customs, memorial dolls grew increasingly uncommon. The practice had mostly vanished by the time of the First World War. Presently, surviving Victorian memorial effigies are exceptionally scarce and greatly prized by institutions and collectors of mourning artifacts. They symbolize a bygone time when families faced the death of a child with structured public grieving and deeply personal, private ceremonies that contemporary feelings find both poignant and profoundly disquieting. After identifying the picture, Dr. Chen dedicated weeks to investigating the Whitmore family through census data, municipal directories, death records, and newspaper archives. She revealed a tragic narrative that clarified the memorial portrait. Thomas and Clara Whitmore were the offspring of Edward Whitmore, a fabric merchant, and his spouse, Margaret. The family resided at 1847 Spruce Street in Philadelphia's Washington Square area, a respectable middle-class district. Edward Whitmore ran a wholesale fabric enterprise, supplying material to tailors and dressmakers across Philadelphia. Census information from 1900 suggests the family was financially stable. They kept a live-in housemaid and were homeowners, both indicators of solid middle-class standing. Clara Elizabeth Whitmore was born on March 3, 1892. She was characterized in a discovered family Bible as a vivacious and loving girl who enjoyed music and was taking piano lessons. A note in a church newsletter from the Second Presbyterian Church referenced Clara's involvement in a children's Easter event in April 1897, where she recited a verse. Thomas Edward Whitmore, born in 1890, was 2 years his sister's senior. School documents indicate he was enrolled at the Philadelphia Public School on Locust Street. In early April of 1898, a scarlet fever outbreak moved through Philadelphia. Scarlet fever, a bacterial sickness that mainly struck the young, was among the most dreaded illnesses of the period. It started with a painful throat and high temperature, then progressed into a characteristic red rash that covered the body. In serious instances, complications included pneumonia, organ damage, and heart failure. A public notice in the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin, dated April 17, 1898, listed the Whitmore home at 1847 Spruce Street as being under official quarantine due to scarlet fever, a standard public health procedure. Health protocol. A bright quarantine notice would have been fixed to their entrance, alerting the community to maintain distance. Official death documents from the Philadelphia Department of Health verified that Clara Whitmore passed away on April 22, 1898, at 2:30 in the morning. The recorded cause of death was scarlet fever, with subsequent complications of pneumonia. She was 6 years, 1 month, and 19 days old. Her funeral service was conducted on April 24, 1898. The interment record from Laurel Hill Cemetery indicates she was laid to rest in the Whitmore family plot, Section 14, Lot 23. The service was inevitably intimate. Quarantine rules and the fear of infection restricted the attendance to only the closest relatives. 3 weeks following Clara's passing, on May 15, 1898, the Whitmore family went to the studio of J.W. Black & Company, a highly regarded Philadelphia photography establishment situated on Chestnut Street. They carried with them a porcelain memorial effigy that had been specially ordered soon after Clara's death. The doll had been crafted by Sarah Mitchell, a Philadelphia doll artisan who focused on memorial pieces. An receipt found in the archives of the Philadelphia Historical Society shows the Whitmore family paid $75 for the memorial doll, a significant amount equal to nearly 3 months of wages for a middle-class household at the time. The picture was meticulously arranged. Thomas, wearing formal black mourning attire complete with a black armband, was positioned cradling the memorial doll, a stand-in for his late sister. The parlor backdrop was decorated with mourning draperies, a framed picture of Clara taken not long before her death, and floral arrangements from the funeral. This remembrance portrait fulfilled several needs. It produced a visual record of the family's sorrow, evidence of their appropriate grief, and reverence for Clara's memory. It granted Thomas a final opportunity to be pictured with his sister, and it also conserved the likeness of the memorial doll itself, an object that would, in time, naturally decay or be misplaced. The subsequent history of the Whitmore family, after 1898, shows the enduring consequences of Clara's death. Census data from 1900 indicates the family continued to live at the same address, but Margaret Whitmore's occupation is marked as none, likely signifying she was incapacitated by persistent sorrow and melancholy. Edward Whitmore's commercial enterprise faltered in the years after Clara's passing. By 1905, the family had relocated to a more modest, less costly dwelling on Pine Street. Edward died in 1911 at the age of 52. His death certificate notes heart failure as the cause, though personal correspondence implies he never emotionally recovered from the loss of Clara. Margaret Whitmore lived until 1923. She did not have any more children. As stated in her obituary, she asked to be buried while holding a small porcelain doll, almost certainly Clara's memorial effigy, thereby reuniting mother and symbolic daughter in death. Thomas Whitmore lived into his adult years. He married in 1915 and fathered 2 daughters, but stories within the family, handed down through the generations, imply he remained deeply marked by his sister's passing. He is said to have kept the 1,898 memorial portrait in his house for his entire life, and shared stories of Clara, the sister he lost when he was only 8 years old, with his own daughters. The memorial photograph of Thomas Whitmore holding his sister's effigy is not merely a historical oddity. It is also a meticulously produced example of Victorian remembrance photography, created by professionals who specialized in chronicling grief. J.W. Black & Company, the Philadelphia studio that produced the photograph, was one of the city's leading photographic firms. Established in 1872 by James Wallace Black, the studio had built a reputation for compassionate, respectful memorial and mourning photography. Victorian memorial photographers confronted distinct technical and emotional difficulties. They were required to produce images that paid homage to the departed, provided solace to the bereaved, and adhered to rigid societal conventions regarding proper mourning conduct, all while operating within the technological constraints of 1,890 seconds photography. The Whitmore Remembrance Portrait showcases the photographer's proficiency in numerous aspects. First, the arrangement is deliberately symmetrical. Thomas is placed a little to the side of the center, generating visual appeal while maintaining the emphasis on him and the effigy. The doll is angled to look straight at the lens, ensuring its facial details are distinctly seen. This was not by chance, but an intentional decision to highlight the memorial replica. The illumination is gentle and uniform, accomplished by utilizing daylight from the studio's large windows, which was softened with sheer fabric. This muted lighting prevented sharp, dark shadows, while supplying sufficient brightness for the comparatively slow photographic films of the period, which needed several seconds of exposure. The setting and decorative items were thoughtfully chosen and placed. The black mourning draperies establish a solemn mood, while offering a tonal difference that causes Thomas and the doll in its white gown to become the focal point. The small stand, holding Clara's framed picture, forges a visual link between the living memorial, the effigy, and the photographic memento. The recent floral arrangements contribute a delicate hint of vitality and elegance to a scene that is otherwise grave. The photographer was meticulous about Thomas's posture and demeanor. The boy sits with a straight back, yet not rigidly, cradling the doll with both arms in a safeguarding, hugging manner. His eyes look directly into the camera, a straightforward, unwavering stare that communicates both sorrow and poise. The technical implementation is impeccable. The image is crisp, correctly lit, and expertly finished. The albumin silver print method employed by J.W. Black & Company yielded deep tonal variations and exquisite detail, which was vital for recording the fine characteristics of the memorial doll and the weave of the textiles. But beyond mere technical ability, Victorian memorial photographers, like those at J.W. Black & Company, comprehended the deep emotional importance of their task. For numerous families, these pictures were the sole physical method to conserve the memory of their departed. The photographer was not simply producing a picture, they were crafting a hallowed object that would be cherished for generations. The consideration dedicated to the Whitmore family portrait is obvious in every element. This was not a hasty business exchange, but a considerate partnership between a mourning family and accomplished artisans who recognized the gravity of their duty. The photograph would have been given to the Whitmore family a few weeks after the session, fixed onto a sturdy cabinet card with the studio's name stamped in gold at the base. It would have been shown conspicuously in their living room, a public declaration of their loss and a personal anchor for their sorrow. Today, this picture endures as proof of Victorian mourning traditions, memorial doll customs, and the craft of remembrance photography. But most significantly, it survives as a record of one family's love and grief, conserved across 125 years. When Dr. Margaret Chen finished the restoration of Thomas Whitmore's memorial portrait in March 2023 and published her findings, the picture spread rapidly across social media, gathering millions of views on various platforms. However, the public response uncovered an unexpected insight into how we perceive Victorian mourning customs today. Many viewers initially considered the picture unsettling. The notion of crafting a doll in the image of a dead child, having a remaining sibling pose alongside it, and preserving that moment in a photograph appeared morbid to contemporary feelings. Remarks varied from disturbing to traumatic, with some asking, why would anyone do this to a child? But as Dr. Chen and other historical experts provided context regarding Victorian mourning culture and the frequency of child mortality, the discussion changed. Individuals started to view the picture not as creepy, but as profoundly human, a family employing the resources and traditions of their time to manage an overwhelming loss. This photograph is significant today for several reasons. First, it offers a perspective on how profoundly our interaction with mortality has transformed. In 1898, death, particularly the death of a child, was an inescapable aspect of everyday existence. The majority of families endured the passing of at least one child. Grieving was an outward, structured, and prolonged process. In the modern era, death has largely become a medical and institutional matter, often removed from daily view. We possess fewer cultural guidelines for mourning and less direct familiarity with loss, particularly the loss of the young. The memorial customs of the Whitmore family, the doll, the formal grief, the remembrance portrait, were not viewed as odd or extreme in their time, but as standard, appropriate, and essential demonstrations of love and sorrow. Comprehending this allows us to recognize that our present unease with these customs says more about our own society's connection with death than it does about Victorian-era grimness. Second, the picture serves as a reminder of the extraordinary advancements in children's health and survival rates. Clara Whitmore succumbed to scarlet fever, an illness that is now readily treated with antibiotics. In 1898, it was a fatal illness for thousands of children. The memorial effigy and the photograph are relics from a time when parents existed with the continual threat of losing their children, an anxiety that, while not erased, has been immensely lessened by contemporary medicine. Third, the image demonstrates the universal human desire to safeguard memories and sustain a bond with those we have lost. While we may not commission memorial dolls today, we participate in our own forms of remembrance. Online memorial pages, tribute videos, preserving rooms as they were, or wearing jewelry that holds the ashes of a loved one. The specific traditions evolve, but the fundamental human impulse remains the same. Fourth, the experience of young Thomas Whitmore highlights that children process grief differently than adults, and that including them in mourning ceremonies can be both significant and therapeutic. Contemporary grief specialists actually advocate for methods not unlike the memorial portrait, creating avenues for children to recognize their loss, articulate their sorrow, and maintain a symbolic link to departed siblings. Finally, this picture holds deep personal meaning for the Whitmore family's descendants. After Dr. Chen released her findings, she was reached by Linda Whitmore Harrison, a great-great-granddaughter of Thomas Whitmore. Linda had been raised hearing family tales about Uncle Thomas's sister who died young, but had never seen any pictures or known the specifics of the story. Seeing this photograph and learning Clara's story has been incredibly moving, Linda expressed in an interview. For 125 years, this image sat in an archive, unidentified and unappreciated. Now, Clara and Thomas's story has been recovered. Their grief has been witnessed. That feels important, like we're honoring their memory the way they deserved all along. The restored portrait has been incorporated into the Library of Congress's permanent assortment of notable Victorian memorial photography. A high-definition digital version has been given to the Whitmore family descendants. Thomas Whitmore, the 8-year-old boy holding his sister's memorial effigy in 1898, died in 1962 at the age of 72. He carried the memory of Clara for his entire life. Now, through the rediscovery and restoration of this picture, that memory has been conserved for generations to come, ensuring that Clara Whitmore, who died at age 6 in 1898, will not be forgotten. That seemingly innocent picture of a boy with a doll proved to be something much more meaningful, a testament to love, loss, and the extraordinary measures families take to preserve a memory. Clara Whitmore lived for only 6 years, but through this photograph, through her brother's sorrow captured in a moment frozen in time, her memory endures 125 years later. Sometimes the most powerful images are the ones that unveil their true significance only when we take the time to truly look.